The Lego sun beat down on Aisha's head. She wiped sweat from her brow, the worn fabric of her wrapper clinging to her skin. The market buzzed around her, a riot of color and noise, but Aisha felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She was bartering for a few cups of rice, her mother's last piece of kente cloth clutched in her hand. She was desperate. The eviction notice tucked into the folds of her wrapper felt like a lead weight. 3 months overdue on rent. Where would they go? Her younger brother, Bayo, needed medicine, and her mother's cough was getting worse. Suddenly, a gleaming black Mercedes, impossibly clean amidst the market dust, pulled up nearby. The crowd parted, murmuring. A driver in a crisp uniform opened the back door. Out stepped Chief Adebayo, a man whose face was known from newspapers and whispered legends of wealth. He was old, perhaps 70, but his agbada was rich, his gold chains glinted. He walked slowly, leaning on an ornate cane, his eyes scanning the market. Then they landed on Aisha. He stopped. His gaze was intense, unreadable. Aisha's heart hammered. What did a man like Chief Adebayo want in this part of the market? He approached, his driver a silent shadow behind him. "Young woman," his voice was deep, surprisingly strong, "I have been looking for someone like you." Aisha could only stare, speechless. "I am Chief Adebayo," he continued, a slight smile playing on his lips. "And I wish to make you my wife." The market seemed to fall silent. Aisha felt 100 pairs of eyes on her. Marriage? To this old, powerful man? It was absurd. It was an escape, a way out of the crushing poverty that threatened to swallow her family whole. Her mother's tearful face flashed in her mind. Bayo's wheezing cough. The eviction notice. I don't know what to say, Chief," Aisha stammered. "Say yes," he said, his eyes holding hers. "You will want for nothing. Your family will be taken care of." The wedding was a blur of opulence, a lavish ceremony in a grand hall overflowing with flowers and important guests. Aisha wore a gown of shimmering lace, heavy with beads. Gold bracelets adorned her arms, a diamond necklace sparkled at her throat. It felt like a dream, a fairy tale, but a strange unease settled in her heart. Chief Adebayo beside her seemed frail, his hand trembling as he held hers. His son Kwame, a handsome man in a sharp suit, watched her with cold, appraising eyes. He did not look happy. The chief's mansion was a palace. Marble floors, high ceilings, servants bustling about. Aisha had her own suite of rooms, larger than her entire family's compound. But it felt cold, impersonal, a gilded cage. The first few days were a whirlwind of introductions, new routines, and the heavy weight of expectation. Chief Adebayo was kind in his own way. He bought her expensive gifts, paraded her at social events. But he was also distant, preoccupied. And there were whispers. Hushed conversations between servants, quickly silenced when Aisha approached. One afternoon, exploring the vast mansion, Aisha came across a heavy, carved wooden door at the end of a long corridor. It was locked. She asked Abimbola, the head housekeeper, about it. Abimbola, a kind-faced woman who had shown Aisha some warmth, hesitated. "That is Baba's private study, ma'am," she said, her voice low. "No one goes in there." Aisha felt a prickle of curiosity. What secrets did this grand house hold? What secrets did her new husband keep? That evening, as they sat in the opulent drawing room, Chief Adebayo seemed agitated. He kept glancing at the grandfather clock in the corner, his fingers drumming on the armrest of his chair. Aisha noticed him discreetly take a small, unlabeled bottle from his pocket and swallow a handful of pills. His hand shook as he did so. "Baba, are you all right?" Aisha asked, concern in her voice. "What are those pills for?" Chief Adebayo's eyes snapped towards her, his expression suddenly harsh. The warmth she had glimpsed earlier vanished, replaced by a chilling coldness. "None of your concern, child," he said, his voice sharp. He pushed himself up from his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped his cane. "Some things are best left unquestioned in this house." He turned and walked away, leaving Aisha alone in the vast, silent room, a shiver of apprehension running down her spine. Aisha tried to settle into her new life, but the mansion felt less like a home and more like an elaborate prison. The other wives of Chief Adebayo, older women with sharp eyes and sharper tongues, treated her with a thinly veiled disdain. They saw her as an upstart, a young thing who had somehow charmed their husband. Their polite smiles never reached their eyes. Aisha felt completely alone. She missed the warmth of her village, the easy laughter of her mother, the familiar chaos of the market. Here everything was hushed, orderly, and suffocating. The jollof rice prepared by the mansion's cook was rich and flavorful, a far cry from the simple meals she was used to, yet it tasted like ash in her mouth. The stifling heat of the Lagos afternoon seemed to press in on her, even within the cool marble walls of the house. To escape the oppressive atmosphere, and to ease the guilt that gnawed at her for leaving her family behind, Aisha began visiting the nearby village. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the chief's estate, a collection of modest mud brick houses, dusty paths, and children playing with makeshift toys. She brought gifts of food and cloth distributed from the back of the chief's gleaming Mercedes, a gesture that felt both generous and obscene. The villagers accepted her offerings, but their eyes were wary. They stared at her expensive clothes, the gold that adorned her wrists and neck with a mixture of awe and resentment. Why did they look at her like that? She was trying to help, wasn't she? One afternoon, as she was handing out bags of rice, she encountered an old woman sitting under the shade of a mango tree. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes dark and piercing. She wore faded, traditional wrappers, the vibrant colors dimmed by years of sun and hardship. This was Mama Ekwa. Mama Ekwa did not approach for a handout. She simply watched Aisha, her gaze unwavering. As Aisha passed, the old woman spoke, her voice raspy but strong. "You wear the clothes of those who stole our lives." Aisha stopped, stunned. I don't understand." Mama Ekwa just shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a deep ancient sorrow. She said nothing more, turning her gaze towards the distant imposing walls of Chief Adebayo's mansion. The old woman's words haunted Aisha. Stole our lives? What did she mean? A seed of unease began to sprout in Aisha's mind, growing with each passing day. Back in the mansion, the silence felt heavier than ever. Aisha started paying more attention to the hushed conversations, the guarded glances. She noticed how the servants tiptoed around Chief Adebayo, their fear palpable. One evening, she was passing her husband's study, the one with the locked door, when she heard raised voices from within. Kwame and his father. Their words were muffled, but she caught phrases. The land rights. Legal challenge. Can't let them win. Aisha pressed her ear closer to the door. Kwame sounded agitated, his voice tight with frustration. Chief Adebayo's responses were low rumbles, but the anger in his tone was unmistakable. What land? What challenge? The unease grew into a knot of suspicion. This house, this life, it was all built on something hidden, something dark. Days later, driven by a desperate need for answers, Aisha found herself drawn back to the locked study. She had noticed Abimbola sometimes left a ring of keys on a hook in the pantry. It was a long shot. She waited until the house was quiet, the chief napping and Kwame out on business. Her heart hammered as she slipped into the pantry. The keys were there. Her hands trembled as she tried key after key in the heavy wooden door. Finally, one clicked. The lock turned. She was in. The study was opulent, filled with leather-bound books and expensive artifacts, but Aisha wasn't interested in the decor. She scanned the room, her eyes searching for, she didn't even know what. A clue. Anything. Her gaze fell upon a bookshelf filled with old photo albums. She pulled one out, its cover dusty and worn. Flipping through the stiff pages, she saw faded photographs of a younger Chief Adebayo, of Kwame as a child, of lavish parties and important-looking men. Then she saw it. Tucked into the back of the album, almost hidden, was a small sepia-toned photograph. A young woman, her face strikingly familiar, stared back at her. She had Aisha's eyes, Aisha's smile. A cold dread washed over Aisha. Who was this woman? And why did she look so much like her? Aisha stared at the faded photograph, her heart pounding. The resemblance was uncanny. The young woman in the picture could have been her sister, her twin. A cold fear gripped her. Who was she? And why was her picture hidden away in this dusty album? She had to know. She sought out Abimbola, the housekeeper, her voice trembling as she described the photograph. Abimbola's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. That was Baba's younger sister, ma'am, Abimbola whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Adesua. She died many years ago. A terrible accident, they said. An accident? Aisha's mind raced. There was something in Abimbola's tone, a hesitation that made her doubt. The way the photograph was hidden, the secrecy surrounding the chief's past, it all felt wrong. Something was very wrong. Aisha knew she had to speak to Mama Ekwa again. The old woman's cryptic words about stolen lives echoed in her ears. Perhaps she held the key to understanding the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of Chief Adebayo's gilded world. She found Mama Ekwa in the village, sitting in the shade of the mango tree, her gnarled hands busy weaving a basket. Aisha approached cautiously, her heart heavy with apprehension. "Mama Ekwa," Aisha began, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, you must tell me. What happened to your village? What did Chief Adebayo do?" The old woman looked up, her eyes searching Aisha's face. She saw the fear, the confusion, the desperate need for truth. Slowly, reluctantly, Mama Ekwa began to speak. Her voice, raspy with age and sorrow, painted a vivid picture of a thriving community, a people deeply connected to their ancestral land. She spoke of fertile farms, a flowing river, a life lived in harmony with nature. Then she spoke of Chief Adebayo. He had come to them with promises of progress, of a brighter future. He wanted their land, he said, for a development project that would benefit everyone. He lied to them all. Mama Ekwa's voice cracked as she recounted the betrayal. The forged documents, the intimidation, the violence. The day the bulldozers came, tearing down their homes, destroying their crops. The taste of dust filled Aisha's mouth as she listened. The sound of children crying, imagined yet vivid. She could almost feel the rough, callous texture of Mama Ekwa's hands as the old woman gestured, her pain palpable. They were forced off their land, driven away like animals, their lives shattered. Aisha listened, horrified, a sickening realization dawning in her mind. The land Mama Ekwa spoke of, it was the very land on which Chief Adebayo's mansion now stood. Her home, her gilded cage, built on the ruins of a stolen heritage. Her visits to the village did not go unnoticed. Kwame, his face a mask of suspicion, confronted her one evening as she returned to the mansion. "What are you doing, Aisha?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Why do you keep going to that village?" I was just trying to help," Aisha stammered, her heart pounding. Kwam's eyes narrowed. "Stay away from them," he warned, his tone almost a plea, a strange conflict in his eyes. "You don't understand what you're meddling in. For your own good, stay away." But Aisha couldn't stay away. The truth was a burning ember in her chest, growing hotter with each passing day. She had to know more. She had to find proof. Driven by a desperate resolve, she returned to the chief's locked study. This time she knew what she was looking for. She searched through drawers, behind books, under stacks of papers. Her fingers brushed against a loose floorboard beneath the heavy mahogany desk. She pried it open. Inside, nestled in a velvet-lined box, was a collection of old documents. Land deeds, contracts, legal papers. Aisha's hands trembled as she examined them. They were the original deeds to the village land signed by Mama Ekwa's ancestors. And alongside them, newer, falsified documents transferring ownership to Chief Adebayo. And she had found the truth. The undeniable proof of his treachery. Aisha clutched the papers to her chest, her mind reeling. This was it. The evidence that could bring down Chief Adebayo's empire, restore justice to Mama Ekwa's people. But what would it cost her? Her marriage, her security, perhaps even her life. Just as she was about to leave the study, the door creaked open. Kwame stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing with fury. He had followed her. He had seen everything. Kwame's face was a mask of cold fury. "What do you think you're doing, Aisha?" His voice was dangerously quiet. The air in the study crackled with tension. Aisha clutched the stolen land deeds to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. There was no point in denying it. He had caught her. She was trapped. "I know everything, Kwame," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I know what your father did. I know how he stole that land." A muscle twitched in Kwame's jaw. "You know nothing," he hissed. "My father built this city. He brought progress." "Progress?" Aisha's voice rose, laced with indignation. "You call destroying people's lives progress? Forcing them from their homes?" Before Kwame could respond, the door opened wider and Chief Adebayo himself stood there, leaning heavily on his cane. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, were clouded with confusion. He had heard the raised voices. "What is this commotion?" he demanded, his gaze flicking between Aisha and his son. Then he saw the papers in Aisha's hand. His face paled. Aisha turned to him, the evidence a heavy weight in her grip. "Baba," she said, her voice trembling now, a mixture of anger and a strange, lingering sorrow. How could you? How could you do this to those people? To my people? Chief Adebayo stared at the deeds, then at Aisha. For a moment, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Regret? Shame? Then his expression hardened. You wouldn't understand, child, he said, his voice raspy. I did what was necessary. For the good of the people. For progress. Progress requires sacrifice, he continued, his voice gaining strength, his eyes now glinting with a familiar arrogance. They were standing in the way. This city, this wealth, it was built on difficult choices. He took a step towards her. I offered you a life of luxury, Aisha, a life beyond your wildest dreams. All I asked for was your loyalty. Your silence. Silence? Aisha cried. You want me to be silent while innocent people suffer? While you live on stolen land? The argument raged, voices rising, accusations flying. Kwame stood by, silent, his face a turmoil of conflicting emotions. He watched his father, then Aisha, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. He was caught in the crossfire, torn between his loyalty and a dawning awareness of the truth. Suddenly, Chief Adebayo swayed. He gasped, clutching his chest, his face contorting in pain. He stumbled, his cane clattering to the marble floor. Ah, Baba! Kwame cried, rushing to his father's side. Aisha watched in horror as the old man collapsed, his body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. His eyes rolled back, a gurgling sound escaping his lips. It wasn't a heart attack, as she might have expected. It was something else, something more final. A stroke. The power dynamic in the room shifted in an instant. Chief Adebayo lay on the floor, helpless, vulnerable. Kwame knelt beside him, his face a mask of shock and fear. Then slowly a new expression crept into his eyes. Calculation. Opportunity. He now controlled everything. Servants were called. A doctor was summoned. Chief Adebayo was carried to his bed, paralyzed, unable to speak. His reign was over. Later that night, Kwame found Aisha in her room. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. The earlier anger was gone, replaced by a chilling calmness. My father is incapacitated, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I am in charge now. He walked towards her, his eyes cold and hard. You have a choice, Aisha, he said, his voice a low whisper. You can keep quiet. Live the life my father promised you. Wealth, comfort, security. No one needs to know what you found. He paused, letting his words sink in. Or, he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous hiss, you can try to expose us. But understand this, Aisha. I will protect my family's legacy, at any cost. He leaned closer, his breath cold on her cheek. People disappear, Aisha, especially troublesome young wives who know too much. Aisha stared at him, her blood running cold. The threat was clear. He would silence her, permanently. Aisha was trapped. Kwame's threat hung heavy in the air, a chilling promise of what awaited her if she dared to speak. Escape? Where would she go? He would find her. Fight? How could she fight a man with so much power, so much ruthlessness? The weight of the stolen land deeds felt like a physical burden, a secret that could either save her people or destroy her. She had to make a choice. Days turned into a blur of fear and indecision. Chief Adebayo lay in his bed, a shadow of his former self, his eyes vacant, his body still. Kwame was now the master of the mansion, his authority absolute. He watched Aisha constantly, his gaze a silent reminder of her precarious position. One evening, as Aisha sat alone in her room, staring out at the city lights that twinkled like distant, indifferent stars, there was a soft knock on her door. It was Abimbola, the housekeeper. Her face was etched with worry, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. Ma'am, Abimbola whispered, slipping into the room and closing the door behind her. I know what you found. I know what Kwame threatened. Aisha stared at her, surprised. Abimbola had always been discreet, almost invisible. I have worked for this family for many years, Abimbola continued, her voice trembling slightly. I have seen too much, heard too much. I cannot stand by and watch this happen. Not anymore. She clutched a small, cloth-wrapped bundle in her hands. I made copies of the deeds while you were distracted, before Kwame could destroy them. She was risking everything! Aisha's eyes widened. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within her. Abimbola's courage was a lifeline. Instead of going to a journalist, a path fraught with danger and uncertainty, Aisha knew she had to be smarter. more modern. She remembered the power of social media, the way stories could spread like wildfire, bypassing traditional gatekeepers. With Abimbala's help, she anonymously leaked the scanned copies of the land deeds online. She posted them to blogs, to activist groups, to anyone who would listen. She told the story of Mama Ekwa's village, of the stolen land, of the Adebayo family's corruption. The scandal erupted. It started as a whisper, a murmur online, then grew into a roar. The documents were undeniable. The story was too compelling, too outrageous to ignore. Protests erupted in the city, people marching in the streets demanding justice for the displaced villagers. The roar of the crowd, the smell of burning tires, and eventually tear gas filled the air. The city was on fire with rage. The police, under immense public pressure, launched an investigation. Reporters swarmed the gates of the Adebayo mansion. Kwame, however, was careful. He had anticipated this. He had lawyers, connections, money. He denied everything, painting himself as a victim of a smear campaign. He buried evidence, silenced witnesses. While the public outcry was immense, Kwame was never arrested. He remained untouchable, protected by his wealth and influence. The fight for the land was far from over. The legal battles would be long and arduous. The wheels of justice turned slowly, if at all, for the poor and marginalized. But something had shifted. The villagers were no longer silent victims. They had found their voice, their courage. And Aisha, though she remained in the shadows, had become a symbol of their struggle, a quiet force behind their movement. The mansion felt different now. The opulence was tainted, the silence heavy with unspoken truths. Chief Adebayo remained a prisoner in his own body, a living testament to the fleeting nature of power. Kwame, though outwardly confident, was forever looking over his shoulder, the ghost of his family's crimes haunting his every move. Months later, Aisha stood with Mama Ekwa on a hill overlooking the disputed land. The mansion loomed in the distance, a monument to greed and injustice. But the air was filled with a new sense of determination. The villagers were organizing, planning, fighting. There was no triumphant victory, no neat resolution. The stolen land remained, for now, in the Adebayo family's hands. The fight was just beginning. Mama Ekwa squeezed Aisha's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "It will take time, child," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "Generations, perhaps." Aisha looked out at the land, her land, their land. A quiet strength filled her. "We have time," she replied, her voice clear and steady. The fight would be long, but she was no longer alone, and she would not give up. The camera would zoom out here, credits rolling, leaving the audience with a sense of hope, yes, but also a stark understanding that the struggle for justice is a marathon, not a sprint.